Hey everyone, welcome to the Music Masterclass. So today is Thursday, May 13th, and it's kind of exciting time. You've been hearing about the new community site that I've developed, that I've implemented on the Circle framework, and the Music Masterclass was one of my main reasons for doing this. I really wanted a place where we could all kind of communicate outside of this one, hour or so that we spend together on Thursdays. I want there to be more. I want more. So that's what that's the really one of the main reasons for the community site. Other things too, but that was really the main thing. So the question is, am I live? Yes, I am. So good. Okay. So I see a couple questions here, so let me see one question from Colleen about the Colorado Jazz Workshop. So that's a local organization here in Colorado that I developed, that I directed for, and I don't know. I think it was probably 5 to 10 years. No, more than 5 years. Less than 10. I don't remember for sure. One reason why this is relevant also is another reason why I developed the community site is I want to do. So the Colorado Jazz Workshop is an organization that you can enroll in, and it would be like weekly rehearsals. You'd get together with other musicians and you'd be placed in either a big band or a combo or both, and you'd have a professional musician like myself directing and kind of coaching. And I did that for a number of years, well, quite a few years. And then during the pandemic, of course, we couldn't have live rehearsals. And so we started trying to do Zoom sessions. And it took like a few months to kind of sort out, well, how is this going to work really? You can't rehearse on Zoom. So we found other things to do. And eventually kind of came up with kind of a curriculum that was working and a method of interacting that actually worked pretty well for us. And I want to recreate something like that now on a bigger scale. So we did that just among, the dozen or so of us, really whittled down to about a half a dozen by the end. And I want to create something like that. So you can expect to see something like that being developed, and the community site that we've created here is going to be the place for that. So in any case, that's kind of relevant in that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I post the link to the community site in the chat. So if you're not already a member, please do so. And it's designed to be really easy. It's totally free. Did I pop out the chat? Hello? Oh, that's because I'm looking at the MuseScore Cafe right now. Give me a second. What am I saying? This is going to be the place where I want people to post. Like if you've got music you want critiqued, that you want feedback on, the community site's going to be the place for that. And we're still working out some kinks and how posting stuff works there. Both Circle and MuseScore.com have created issues that I'm struggling to work around. But in any case, that's the thing. So this link, if you haven't already gone in and signed up, please do so. So there's the site, and do so. So this is like, if you're already here in the Music Master class, you can see there's the watch page here. And when you're on the watch page, you can actually watch. And if it's live, it'll show live. If not, it'll show you the countdown. That's the thing. So this, there was me, right? And then you can also look at, find the older episodes and listen to the theme music if you like. But it's the share and discuss area here then where people are posting their stuff. So I had noticed that I had set things up wrong before, and I made a note to myself. And now that I fixed it, I don't need that message anymore. So I'm going to delete it because I'm an administrator and I have that power. So there we go. I won't delete your stuff, I promise. So this will be the place to be posting music. So I want to be focusing today on some pieces that have been sitting, that people have posted to other places. They posted on MuseScore.com. And by the way, I still want to use MuseScore.com for that. I still want people to upload to MuseScore.com because it's a great place where we can all then easily listen to your music online without having to download it and load it in the MuseScore. Not everyone here necessarily even uses MuseScore. I'm trying to be more general than that, right? So, I still want people uploading to MuseScore, but then you just paste your link into a post. Except that right now it's a little bit broken because things are a little broken, and I'm trying to get that fixed. So, in any case, you can still paste your link in there. It'll just the link won't actually work when you click on it. You'll have to copy and paste it and fix the typo that got inserted into it. So I want to take some music that's been uploaded already and take a look at that. So the first thing that I want to look at is over on MuseScore.com. I'm going to go to the Music Masterclass group, which I might be retiring, or at least I'll disable the comment section of it, maybe, because I don't want this to be our comment section. I want the community. Part of the whole purpose of the community is to bring things together in one place so that they have some critical mass to it, so that when you post something, people actually see it, because now there's one place where people go for stuff. So I still want people to upload their music to MuseScore.com. We can still have a group here to add it to. I'm not totally sure how that's all going to work, but in any case, so Carol Larson is a violinist who hopefully is with us. Are you with us today, Carol? I know she's been here a couple previous weeks, and this is a piece that I guess is a popular song in China, and I don't speak Chinese, but Lang Lang maybe. I don't know how. I don't know the vowel pronunciations or anything in Chinese, so I don't know how to do this. But in any case, it's a song that she has arranged for violin and viola. And if you check out the comments there, I think she's also arranged it for two violins. In other words, she's altered the viola part so that it fits in the range of a violin also. So let me take that and post that link into the chat. Yes. All right. So, Carol, feel free to tell us more about the piece and about any questions that you have. Long. Is that a pronunciation? Um, I didn't know that you spoke Chinese, though, Colleen. Okay, so I'm going to play this from within MuseScore because it'll be easier for me to do things with it then. And let me reset my volume because I remember now that that's always an issue, right? Okay, so I'm going to play it here. And it's a short piece. We're just going to listen to it and then talk about it. Carol, again, if you've got things that you want to tell us or ask about it, feel free to do that in the chat here. the smile at the Picardy third at the end. That's what it's called, by the way, when you have a song in a minor key and it ends on a major chord. It's a typical device of especially Baroque music. So, all right. So Carol is telling us here. I see it's a theme song for a show, like a television show. And yeah, so I assume this would be playable on the piano pretty easily. Also, like you said, if you change the clef, and you'd probably actually drop it down an octave. So yeah, I think this is the song itself is a popular song, and so it's a nice song. And I think you did a good job arranging it here. I'll talk about some of the things that are going on with it in terms of the notation of it, as well as maybe some musical choices that we could talk about. So. She had a week before performing it at a university opening social, and wow, that is a cool story. That's nice. You only had a week and you couldn't find an accompanist, so you decided to write it as a duet. So one of the things that I want to say right now, while I'm thinking of it before I forget, I've been talking about sonata form. Well, I've been talking about it, right? Meta talking about it. I've been saying I'm going to talk about sonata form. I still want to talk about sonata form. But actually, I think Carol's piece here has that and a couple other things that have been happening going on lately have made me think that actually duets are maybe something. So in our community space there, I've got a challenges space, and I think the next challenge is actually going to be writing duets, whether they're just duets for in two individual single note instruments like this, or if it's a duet between two pianos or voice and piano, whatever. And I'll tell you why. It's because they're playable, right? I mean, you can play solo piano music and have it be satisfying. Solo guitar music, very satisfying. Solo harp music, very satisfying. After that, it's not like you can't have an unaccompanied solo violin piece. They exist. They absolutely exist. They're cool, but it's more of a small piece of the repertoire, right? The violin repertoire is mostly about violin accompanied by something, whether it's just a piano or a string quartet or an orchestra or whatever. So the idea that most instruments work well as parts of an ensemble, if you want your music performed, you can write for piano, and all you need to do is find one pianist to play it. But if you want to write for solo violin, okay, great. All you have to do is find one violinist. But if you want it performed by in a context where you have a little more freedom in the writing, a duet is really your best option, because now all you got to do is find two people, and yet you can actually create harmony and do the things that you might want to do musically. So I think that a duet project is what we're going to do next. So I want to talk about some of the duet aspects of this. So one comment that came up was about the clef and so forth. So the first thing I can do in MuseScore is just go here and just change the clef to bass clef. It's going to be way too high, right? This is crazy high. So I wouldn't really do that. Maybe I would write this in treble clef at first and then switch to bass clef around here. So, now I have something that I could read on the piano. And I actually didn't have to change the octave of this to make it work. It was, it worked as is. Oh, I guess I have to change back to treble clef probably somewhere around here. So, just to make it more readable for those of us, I don't know if there's a word for people, okay, I just can think of a couple kind of jokes about, what do you call someone who can speak two languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone who can speak more than two languages? A polyglot. What do you call someone who can speak only one language? An American. Right. That's what do you call someone who can only read one clef, basically, or only two clefs? A pianist. I can only read two clefs. I don't read alto clef well enough, and I'm sure most of you don't really either. So by changing the clefs, we have something that we can talk about a little more easily. Now, while I'm dealing with just the notation of it, I would observe that the piece is in E minor, right? I mean, it starts right off on a very clear E minor chord, right? That's E minor. and it ends on that E major chord, sure, but the piece is very, very, very clearly in E minor. So why not actually give it a key signature? I don't know, Carol, if you had a reason for it, or if maybe you just didn't know how to add key signatures, but all I did was click the first measure, and then I clicked the palette. So yeah, and actually, when I'm writing for viola, what I actually do, because I don't want to have to keep changing between treble and bass clef, I've showed this before, but I actually use this clef. Let me write some notes in. So here's middle C. There's a line that I could have written for viola, and then again, going down. Right, this is totally playable on viola. That low C, that's the lowest viola note there. What I like to do is, instead of using the alto clef, which is this is what viola actually reads, when I'm writing, I will often use this clef here, the treble clef 8VA bassa. So look at where middle C is on the actual alto clef. It's right there on the middle line. If I switch to this clef, it's this. It's the space right above the middle line. Technically, we're supposed to number our spaces from the bottom, right? So that's space 3. So this I can read. I can see that that's a C. I just have to transpose the octave in my head, and it keeps everything, if it all fit basically on the staff before, it's all going to basically fit on the staff now. So this is my go-to staff, the treble 8VA bassa, when I'm, or we just call it an octave clef. That's the staff I normally use when I'm actually writing for viola. So I don't have to keep switching between treble and bass. But this piece lent itself very well to that, because it really does spend time. It's got two different things going on in the viola part. The first part is this. I'm singing it an octave lower, but I'm not singing the pitches right, but you get the idea. But then it switches to boom, 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 boom. It switches this simpler pattern, this quarter note pattern, instead of that eighth note pattern. And at the same time, that's when it really drops into something you might consider the bass range. Here at the beginning, this is not bass range. So this could be played by two flutes, really. It doesn't ever go below middle C. I mean, that middle C is like the lowest note on a lot of flutes. Some flutes hit the B below it, but and so sometimes it can be a little hard to play that C as part of an arpeggio. But in any case, almost every instrument that's a sort of a treble type instrument can play these first 8 bars. But now we're into a place where now it's reaching into the bass range, or at least the tenor range. So one of the things to think about when you're writing, if you're writing a duet, is like, well, what are the ranges that you're really dealing with? And one choice that I know that Carol had to make here is, because the viola, I think chose, right? Because she could have put this viola part in the same octave, right? She could have started with that low E, but she made a conscious choice not to, that she wanted it to be a higher sound. My guess is that if I find the original recording of this, which I probably should have done, because my guess is, if I find the original, so I have no idea which of these might be original music, or if it's something else entirely. And so this might be something totally randomly different, and we're going to get to hear some ad for something first.
乍一看是不是又不认识了呀？但是我们
No?
仔细回想一下，小时候的奶奶一定对你说过这样的一句话：你看你的袜子都破了，赶紧脱下来，让我给你聊几阵。
No music?
这个字啊，就读聊，
That's
是
what I
横
get
缀
for
的
not
意思。
checking this out
聊
first.
边
Well, in any
聊几
case,
阵。
I'm guessing that maybe the original was like a piano accompaniment that was just, using that thing that we like to do when we arrange for piano. Have the introduction just use, the alto range there, the middle C-ish kind of range to start off a piece. It's a super duper cliche kind of thing that happens. Let me just create a new score, and I'll use the grand staff template here. And as soon as I do this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to... Nope. 1, 2. Nope. 1, 2, and then tie over. All right, here we go. All right, let's listen to this. All right, too fast, but y'all recognize that song? We all live in the 80s or 70s or whenever that came out. The Rose. Some say that was way too fast again, but here we go. Something like that. That idea of starting off with this sort of arpeggiated pattern in this range. I mean, that's Mozart, the famous piano sonata in C major. I could take that same melody and replace it with boom, and then I have to just change these two notes. Right, so this is such a cliche. You can pretty much write the same music, except it's not a doubled B. Don't do that. Don't double your leading tone in this type of chord situation. So yeah, I get to see all sorts of different little variations on this thing. When you're doing this Alberti bass, that's what this is called, this repeating pattern like this. It's if the melody note is your leading tone, you don't really want to have the leading tone doubled here. That's considered bad form. So Mozart doesn't do that. He uses a G, and then he puts a seventh on this like that. Let me get rid of this. Right, that's the Mozart thing. I think actually, if I'm honest, I think the original Bette Midler, the Rose thing, wasn't the Alberti bass pattern. It was instead something more like this. I think it was something more like D. Something more like that. By the way, watch what I'm doing here. I select these two notes there, and then just R. That repeats the pattern. All right, it was something more like that, but same basic idea. So this is all kind of pianistic cliche writing for pop piano, but not just pop, because Mozart. So I have a sense that that's probably what was going on in the original, and that's why Carol is doing this. So feel free also to piano vocal. So was it like that? Was it like high, like kind of like that Mozart piano, and then the band comes in? Oh, the whole thing was just piano and vocal solo. So, but the piano probably did drop down lower like this because it's such a common thing. So. So one thing when you're writing for a duet like this, if the instrument is capable of getting down lower, then by all means you do it. And this, by the way, is the lowest note for viola, that low C. That's the lowest, that is the low string on a viola. It's the C below middle C. Cello goes one octave below that. So there aren't necessarily a lot of instruments that have this exact range. So viola can hit that low C. If you think about, say, a clarinet, which I used to play, and I know Colleen plays. The lowest note written on a clarinet is a low E, and then it's actually sounding as a D. So it's actually this D here. So if we wanted this to be a clarinet duet, we'd probably take the whole thing up a step to make it so that the lowest note we could actually get out of it. There's other instruments like an alto saxophone. The lowest note written would be a C, middle C, but that middle C would be about this E flat, actually. Is that the lowest note, or they hit a B? I can never remember. I always have to look these things up. In any case, alto sax, but tenor sax get lower. So a tenor saxophone could hit this. A trombone could hit this easily, but it couldn't hit these higher notes there. You'd have to take those down. So if you're going to try to write music like this for a duet and you want it to be flexible, you're going to have to either restrict the range, because there's very few instruments that can hit both this F sharp there and this low C here. Very few instruments that have that wide of a range, or that exact range, because they might have that wide of a range, but it's shifted up or shifted down. So you might have to restrict the range of your piece if you want it played by, multiple instrument possibilities, or just accept that you're going to have to change the key when you change instruments, or change octaves for particular passages. And those are all totally valid techniques, totally valid things to be doing. So, so lowest written note is a B flat. Yeah, okay, that's right. I know that because baritone sax has the low A. I know that. I just forget sometimes. So yeah, low B flat. So low concert D flat. So the lowest note on the so this D here is actually playable on an alto sax, but that C here isn't. So if we took the whole thing up a whole step, it would be playable on both clarinet and alto saxophone. However, if I take it up a whole step, this becomes a G sharp. That G sharp becomes a high F. Well, that high F is, that G sharp concert pitch is high F. That's the highest written note you'd ever want to give an alto saxophone, and F sharp if he's got the special. So Sam, hopefully you can help me out here also, because this one I don't know the answer to. That one I did. I just couldn't access it in my brain at the moment. Do alto saxophones commonly have a high F sharp without having to use altissimo? I know tenor saxophones, some do have the F sharp, some don't. For altos, I guess I don't know if that's even a thing. So in any case, these are all things that you think about when you're putting these duets together, is what octaves can you put them in? And if you're writing a flute duet, say, well, you're never going to get into this bass range unless you're using alto flute. And even alto flute, the lowest note is going to be about the F, I think, here. I'd have to look that one up also, because I don't remember things. I remember a lot of things, but things that I don't use often enough, I forget. So you'll have to be thinking about the range that you put these things in. But if you're writing for treble instruments, you will have to stay with this type of texture, where the bottom instrument is doing more like that Mozart thing, or like this Bette Midler thing here. This is just a pop cliche here. I could have instead of that, which I think is right for the Rose. There's just any number of other pop songs that have, okay, change these E's to E flat. Actually, here, I'll just control click them. And what is that? The Young and the Restless theme, Nadia's theme from Nadia Comaneci in the Olympics. That's, I can't quite picture the melody in my head because too much else is going on. Can someone sing it for me? Yeah, that's not going to work, right? If this were Zoom, though, we could do that, I will say. I got the Rose in my head now, and I can't hear Nadia's theme. But anyhow, variations on this are just a cliche of the piano repertoire. Someone could type in the notes, maybe, and put me out of my memory misery here. In any case, these are all things you have to think about, how you're going to create your accompaniment when you just have a single line instrument. And if it can get low enough to feel like you're in the bass range, great. If not, that's okay too. But then you're going to have to face issues like this one that Carol is facing here. And so Carol, like you mentioned, it was that it was piano and voice, right? I think you said originally piano and vocal solo. Well, I'm sure the voice wasn't singing up here in this octave, right? That high E. I mean, that's Queen of the Night territory there. It's actually an F, right? The F right above that I think is the queen of the queen. Oh, someone else already said the Young and the Restless. Colleen already did. I missed that you said that. So but there you go. So this is a high note. I mean, that's not something that the voice would be doing in that octave there. Although there is this whole tradition of Chinese pop singing with the really high voices, but I don't think that high. I could I could totally be wrong, but I doubt it. You never know. So if this was the original key, then Carol had to decide, do I put this high E here, or do I put the melody in the range that the voice was in, which is down here? And the problem is, well, if you want the accompaniment to be this kind of pattern, now they're kind of getting in each other's way. So she might have made the conscious choice to take the violin part up an octave to get out of the way of the accompaniment, which you're going to have to make that kind of choice a lot if you're writing for an accompanying instrument. If your lower instrument, the bottom instrument, is a treble type of instrument, that's not able to go down into the bass range, or you just choose not to go into the bass range. You do have to decide if you can, if you're okay with the melody being that high. And so, Carol, you are so Carol did transpose it, but did you transpose it up an octave or actually to a different key? Is what I'm wondering. I mean, was it in E but just a step lower? I mean, an octave lower, or was it a different key and you just moved it to make it more violin friendly? Because there's the other thing. Vocalists don't really care what key. I mean, they care about range, but the difference between E and E flat is just a half step. The difference between E and E flat on a violin, especially E flat minor, is enormous, right? Because E minor, you can use all your open strings, and you can use close position. I forget the terminology, but when you're playing the violin, the frets, they're not frets, it's the fingerboard, whatever we call these things, where you put your fingers. You can use just the open strings and the first couple of positions where your fingers go. You don't have to do a lot of shifting up here. And it's easier to play in tune and easier to just play physically, to play in keys like 1 sharp versus had it been just a half a step lower. Instead of E minor, had it been in E flat minor or equivalently D sharp minor, that would have been a nightmare on the violin, because now you're having to be way up. You don't get to use any open strings, and your fingers have to kind of live higher. I say nightmare. I don't know. I don't really play the thing. I just know the dirty looks that I get when I write in keys like that for string players. So some string players will say, no, I'm a pro, I can handle that. But I'm telling you, I've worked with professional musicians who still say, please don't do that. Please don't do that. It's not going to sound as good as you want it to sound. So I take them at their word. So here, that's something else you consider when you're writing for these kinds of instruments, the key, the specific key that you'd put it in. So the difference between E and E sharp and D sharp is significant. But then you also get to ask, is this too high? So Carol wrote this for herself. She knows what she can play. She knows how her high E sounds. I know that's a high note on a violin, but it's not a crazy high note, but it's a high note, right? And it has a particular sound quality to it that can be, if you're a good violinist, that can be a beautiful singing, piercing kind of note. If you're a beginning violinist, that's going to be one you'll have a hard time getting in tune, right? Because that's a violin strings are the low, from low to high. Let me go back to the regular treble clef here. From low to high, a violin strings are this G here, the D there, then A here, then E here. So you're playing on the high E string an octave up. So you're basically an octave up. I can tell you, because I know just enough about physics to tell you this, that's exactly halfway up. So you have to play that E exactly halfway up from the nut. Is that what we call this? I only know guitar terminology, really, and even then I'm not sure about it. But from where this part of the violin is to this part of the violin. Of course, I'm not even holding it right either, so whatever. This part to that part. So the part that's closer to your neck there, where the bridge is, you're halfway up. And the difference of just a tiny little bit of where you stick your finger makes a bigger difference in pitch than it does when you're down here. So here you have a lot more leeway to be off by a little bit, and it only affects the pitch by a little bit. When you're here, you have only half as much room for error. And so it's a lot harder to get in tune, and it's physically harder to press because I'm pretty sure the strings are further from the fingerboard. Carol, please help me out with that. Um, so yeah, string players don't like flat keys. That is an absolute truth. And so C minor wouldn't have been a great choice. So by moving into E minor, it became a much nicer key, but it does put that E high. So Carol has to know that she can play that high E and play it strongly, play in tune, and sound good on it. You will notice that MuseScore warned her at the end when it got even higher. This G. Now we're more than halfway up the fingerboard here. And now it's really getting to be, virtuoso solo kind of thing. I mean, this isn't difficult to play music. So it's not something you can't write. And Carol knows her own playing and knows what she can play and knows that she could do this. So this is great. If you're writing for string players in general, be aware that MuseScore is telling you this. Notice how the notes are kind of this is dark yellow. If you called it gold or green, you would be totally excused for calling it that. And so this range up here, once you get above that, you're more than an octave up that E string. Now it's really separating out, the pros from the amateurs a little bit as far as who's really going to be able to play this and make it sound good. So this could be a reason to have tried for another key other than C minor. And for instance, had it gone down a half step to B minor, that would have made the melody easier, but it would have meant the viola couldn't get as, it's really nice the viola got to hit that low C there. So, you have to make those decisions, and these can be difficult decisions independently of anything else that's going on. So Carol's comfortable playing high and playing double stops. So there's the other thing that I'm glad you mentioned that, because I saw these and was going to come back to them and then get kind of forgotten about them. These double stops here. Now, first of all, I've talked about just from an arranging standpoint that writing a melody in moving sixths like this or moving thirds is a beautiful thing. It almost always sounds really good. And sixths are especially nice, and they actually work out really well on a violin. If you think about it, the strings on a violin are a fifth apart, as I kind of showed here. So if I want to play, and I'm not a violinist, but I have to know just enough about violin to figure this stuff out. I have to think about, because not all combinations of two notes are playable at all. Some of them might not be, some of them are just totally not playable. So one of the things I have to think about is, and I'm going to have to use, I guess position is the word, but fret from a guitar language is how probably most people, including myself, are more comfortable thinking about this. This B, I would play on the A string in second position. Is that even right, or is position refer to the hand position? It's second fret if it was a guitar. E at third position there, or third fret, whatever the correct term is 3 half steps up is how you get that G. So those are very naturally, it fits the shape of your hand. If you just think about your hand on the fingerboard there, the shape of the hand is such that adjacent fingers, each one is a little longer than the next, or it's angled in a way in which that happens. And so very naturally, if you just stick your fingers down there, it's going to give you that where the higher string, your finger already is in a slightly higher position. So it's all very natural. If I'm working through the mechanics of this right, and Carol, please help me out. So 6, I would expect to be the simplest interval, one of the simplest intervals, because the shape of your hand and the tuning of the instrument in fifths totally supports it. Whereas other intervals, then you have to think a little harder about whether it's going to be playable or not. But 6 are often going to be both good musically and good on the violin. So that was some, knowing your instrument when you're writing things like this. So double stops like this are playable if you know the instrument and can do what you would need to do. I've showed this before, but let me grab, except I don't remember where it is. Hey. I have You can't actually get these anymore that I know of, but it's called the stringograph. Created by this guy here. Dan Talion. No, Donald Martino. Don Talion is the name of his company. And what it is, it's fake fingerboards. Here's my violin. And so I can actually take this thing and work out for myself. And it's got everything all labeled on it, so I can just stick my finger right there on the B and stick this finger right there on the G, and I can see that's how I would do it. And that way you can kind of test for yourself how big the stretch is, whether you're asking someone to put one finger on a string here and another finger on a string. Violins don't bend like that, right? So if you can't physically reach it, you can't play it. And so if you don't have an actual violin, and even if you did, you might not know where the notes are, this gives you a nice way to do it. So I don't know if you can actually get this thing, but let me type the name of it in there and then someone can look it up. And so you can't post links here. You can't post links here in the chat, but you can back in the community. So if someone finds out about the stringograph, look it up. So thirds, Carol, I'd love it if you could speak to that. Thirds are great musically. Some thirds will be playable. Some thirds won't. Right? You can't, like, just to talk about a third that you can't play, think about this. What about a third of G, this low G, and the B right above it? How are you going to do that? You need the low G string to play the G, but you also need the low G string to play the B. Can't do it. So, yeah, you can't play double stops that require both the notes to be on the same string, basically. So yeah, there'll be, it'll also mean that your fingers are in a slightly more uncomfortable position depending on where they are, unless you get lucky because one of the strings is open, and then it's really easy. If one open string, then you only need one finger to play the other one. So there's all sorts of things like that you have to think about when you're writing for strings. And it's way easier to write for instruments you know. That's what I would say. Way easier if you know the instrument. So if you play the instrument even just a little bit to have a sense of these things, it can be really useful. So in any case, I didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about with this piece, but it's because the melody and the chords are coming from an existing song. I have nothing to say about them, right? They are what they are. They're very nice. The chord progression is quite simple. It's a very, again, kind of typical chord progression here. D, then often it would have gone down to B. Right? That's a typical chord progression in a million kinds of music. It doesn't do that. In this case, after the C, it comes to a nice G major chord. So it's, it doesn't have, it turns that cliche around at the end. But that, in minor keys, that little chord progression of 1 and then flat 7 and then flat 6 and then usually on to 5, back to 1, do 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 dum, do 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 dum, do 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 dum, do 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 do. That one had a C sharp in it. That's 25 or 6/4, right? But so that one had an extra note thrown in there. But there's a million other songs that have some variation of that descending line there. The chord progression here is very straightforward. And one of the things to know about it, like, she has this just root 5 root, which is great because the third is so prominent in the melody, right? The thirds are the melody all the way through here. So we don't need the third doubled in the accompaniment. So that's a good choice there. There's no reason to double it. Because the melody is hanging out on the third almost exclusively here, then really what we need are roots and fifths in the bass. So roots and fifths are often going to be, that's the bass player's job, as I've often pointed out, as my friend, the bass player, rootsandfifths@gmail.com. Someday she's going to get inundated with email from people saying, hey, I heard about you. But that's the cliche of a bass player's job is roots and fifths. And of course, it's way more than that. It can be way more than that. But fundamentally, that is the basis of a bass part is realizing that the roots and fifths are kind of fundamental there because the melody is often living here on the third. So that was a good choice here to have the accompaniment be that simple harmonically, just to be emphasizing roots and fifths. Now, one thing that could, like this measure here, this measure doesn't have a third. This measure is E, B, E. It's root, fifth, root, and the melody is root, fifth. The third isn't happening here. It's the first time in the piece when that's really been the case, where the third hasn't prominently featured in the melody, at least in the main melody. I wasn't paying attention in the intro. So here there's no third. And so it's all kind of open fourths and fifths and octaves. We have an octave here, an octave there, a fifth there, right? So, and then an octave again here. And there is something about that I associate with Asian music, that it's not based on triads, but is going to be based more on fifths and octaves. And because, the idea of triads is a very Western thing. Not that hasn't been incorporated into Asian music today, but if you want to if you want to sound like you're bringing in Asian elements, it's one of the thing is of having these open octaves and fifths, chords without thirds is going to be part of that sound for sure. So that was, whether, I don't know if that was a conscious choice there, but if you weren't deliberately going for an Asian sound, I might have changed the pattern here to let the left hand sound the third. By doing that, boom, 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 boom. I'm singing the old part. 1, 3, 5, 3. I have to think about what I'm doing here. 1, 3, 5, 3. That pattern might have made more sense over that melody if you weren't trying to sound Asian. But, if it's trying to sound Asian, then I think that original pattern actually worked better for that purpose. So that's something to think about. Now, in general, you won't necessarily always want to have just these simple repeating patterns like this. I mean, this is a bass part here, right? Just root, 5, root. It's a simple bass part. And when you're using a bottom instrument in a duet that's not actually a bass, or even if it is a bass, frankly, don't necessarily feel like you have to limit yourself to simple bass patterns. One of the reasons we study counterpoint is to open ourselves up to other possibilities. And that's going to be my segue to talking a little bit about some fugues. So I mentioned that I want to talk a little bit about some fugues that are out there. And I'm just going to not go into depth on these because I think there's things I want to talk about collectively, and I've been talking so much about fugues, so much about counterpoint, but this is a great bridge to talking about that. So let me jump back to my to Carol's piece here. So Carol, really nice job on this. I hope it went well. I assume it did. The performance of it, but having music actually performed that's one of the things I want to focus on a little bit here. Yeah, that probably sounded really nice. So this simple bass pattern here is very effective for a piece like this where you're really just featuring the melody. But sometimes, when you're writing a duet, you want to have a little more interaction between the parts, more counterpoint, and that's when we get into things more like, well, first of all, actually, in my in the masterclass theme music here, right? I have this, so it's a repeating pattern, but it's got a little more rhythmic interest to it. And it's designed to have interest, to have like motion, that the bass part can be providing motion in places where maybe the melody is just holding a longer note. Plus, of course, there's all the counterpoint within the upper voices. This isn't a fugue, but it's counterpoint. Now, if I flip over to MuseScore.com and we check out, so Dave has written this really interesting piece here. And I just want to play a little bit of this. This is the latest version here, Dave, so you can hopefully help me out here. So I'm just going to put in this version here because it's the most recent one I see, and I'm going to play it for you. And so Dave's experimenting with some fugue type ideas, and it's using some like okay. So when I say fugue type ideas, it's got imitative counterpoint. Here's our melody. That's our melody, and then that the right hand comes in with a melody that's based on an imitation of the original melody, but it's not an exact transposition of that melody, nor is it even a traditional tonal adjustment. One of the things when you're writing fugues, when your answering part comes in, it's normally up a fifth or down a fourth. It's at scale, it's centered around scale degree 5, but you try to do it in a way that it doesn't feel like you've changed keys, and so you make little adjustments to things. And that's not what Dave's doing here. He's made adjustments for his own reasons. And I'm just going to play you the piece. So, yeah, Dave, I think you're really on to some really nice ideas in here. And so, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going on here. And one of the things I just want to point out some of the features of this, and then I'm going to also show you some of these other short fugues that people have been working on. So he's got that original subject here. That's what we would call this, if in a fugue we call it the main theme. Ba da dum, boo da boo da. By the way, I hear that. I hear this low A as the downbeat personally. So somehow, I don't know if I'm hearing the time signature change in there, but somehow that low A feels like a downbeat to me. And I don't know if you were literally thinking 4/4 or if you just started with a 4/4 score and started throwing some notes in, but you might want to think about whether or not it really is what you think it is rhythmically. Um, I mentioned that when I wrote that one fugue, I wrote this whole line without even thinking about what time signature was, and then surprised the heck out of myself when I realized it was 3/4. But this then do da dum boo da ba. This do da dum boo da is this line here boo da dum boo dum. That this line in the bass part here is really the same essential line that's happening in the right hand, which is an echo of this measure, but it's turned upside down, right? Instead of coming down in the left hand here, now we see a version of it that goes up. And instead of it being 2 repeated notes, it changes to a half step. Just like in the right hand, it changes to a half step there. Let me start that measure over again. And then we have this right. That figure also is a recurring figure throughout. So it has this idea of reuse of motifs, even if it's not literally following the exact form of a fugue. It's got a subject that it reuses. It's got other motifs it reuses. It's not trying to do it using tonal language. I think if you look at Bartok, you would probably find music that's not dissimilar in Bartok. So, oh, okay. So the organ has clusters and maybe has different rhythm. I'm just going to stick with this one. One thing that I'm really curious about, Dave, is you've got all these notes written with note heads here, and I have no idea what you're trying to suggest with that, um, or if somehow you accidentally pressed V and made the note head disappear, because I have no idea what you're indicating with those note headless notes. Let me just flip over to one other version of the piece. Is this, that one says piano, this one says organ. Okay, so this has got harmonization to all of that. All right, so this whole opening section here was not in the other version. It basically started there with measure 5. And then after that, it looks pretty much pretty similar here. There might be other stuff. Oh, I see now there's a nice pedal point at the end. I love it. So I'm going to stop. Oh, well, no, I'm going to keep going because it does keep going. So if you've ever heard the term pedal point or heard people talk about a bass pedal and wondered, well, what does that really mean? This is what it means. Literally on an organ, you got foot pedals. You put your foot down on that C and you just leave it there while you have two hands available to do whatever you want up on top. So it doesn't look like you've actually, well, yeah, here you've got stuff that totally would require two hands to play. Some of this could have been played on the piano, right, with chords in the right hand and holding that pedal point in the left hand. But once you get to this spot here, we actually need both our hands to play it, and the foot is what's going to sustain that pedal point. So good job there. By the way, one of the things I see even without downloading it is, my guess is that, well, actually, I don't know. This C here, the first C was in voice 1 because there was only one voice. This second C might have been in voice 2 because the upper notes were voice 1, but then the tie should probably be flipped down. You probably need to flip that tie down so that it's, curving below as opposed to curving above. When you have voices coming and going at different times, sometimes you have to play with the directions of the ties and slurs to do the right thing. It does the right thing if you're consistent about voices, but when voices come and go, you'll have to adjust things. So in any case, that pedal point is a common fugue ending technique, which is really a nice thing. So Dave's still experimenting with this, and this is one. Okay, yeah, so accidentally pressing V. So what I would do is I would just select all and then go to the inspector and just click the visible thing, and then everything will be visible. That's the easiest way to fix it. So a cluster would mean just taking your hand and going playing a bunch of notes at once that aren't a chord. They're a bunch of notes. This is a cluster right here. Well, I can't. I should download it. They kept being different versions of it, and I had downloaded an older one. But I love that you're posting this kind of work in progress. This is version 6. And so, again, I will love it now if people start posting this stuff in the community, because that'll give us a nice centralized place for things. But if I open Dave's piece now here, so if you're wondering what a cluster is, any combination of notes that's got like multiple notes at once, but it's not a chord, well, that's basically a cluster. So this here is a cluster. You got two notes a second apart and another note a third away. That bottom note forms a tritone against the top one. It's a dissonant combination of notes. Now, okay, that particular combination, yeah, we could look at it harmonically and say, okay, well, maybe it's part of an E half diminished chord with the G missing, and there's other way, it's an E, a B flat, and a D, and that, I can probably put a name to that. But if I just stick on some more notes here and add an F and add a G and add an A, now it's a cluster. Right, that of course I can't play that, at least not with only one hand, but that's anyhow what a cluster is. And really, that's what's going on throughout here. Like at the very beginning of the piece, when he does that splitting, well, let me play this version of it. The sound that we get right here is 2 notes a second apart, 2 seconds in a row. F, G, F sharp, G sharp. They're separated by an octave, but yeah, other than that, they're 2 notes a second apart. And then we have those 2 a second apart, and then half step away, 2 other notes a second apart. The effect is if we just played 4 notes a half step apart. That's also essentially a cluster, just sort of spread out in time a little bit. Okay, so the tie in the last bars, well, it looks like, yeah, I don't know what you're saying about the tie, to be honest, but if this tie here that I talked about flipping, I'm just going to press X to flip it down, and now it's flipped. Now, I don't know if you actually reverse the voices here. Yeah, it looks like you did what I would have wanted you to do. You put the low C in voice 2, even though the previous C had been in voice 1. That's the way to do this, because yeah, that's the right way to use voices when they're coming and going. Use only voice 1, and then when you need a second voice, add the second voice. And if it means that a particular part changes voices between measures, that's okay. It's okay. All right. So I encourage you to keep working on that and post it. And post it in the community and ask us some other questions about ideas you have. Meanwhile, I also do want to show one other thing that is really cool project, Humble New Music. I think you're the one that came up with this. And it's a little project that they're doing on their own of short fugues. And so I asked if it was okay to show this, and you said yes. So here it is. I'm going to post this into the chat. And it's a group where there's been a little bit of a challenge to create short fugues. And I think the idea is to go along with the video. The YouTube has some feature where they highlight short videos. That was actually a new one on me. I wasn't really even familiar with it. So you might have to fill us in a little bit on that. But anyhow, if you want some more engagement on this, feel free to post in the Music Masterclass community. But aside from that, just be aware that this is a thing that exists, and people have been posting all sorts of cool little short fugues. And I'm gonna go with one, since I had they had asked me to come up with the theme, the subject for one of the fugues. I said, hey, let's use London Bridge. Why? No reason. I thought it would work well. I wanted. There's a tradition of writing fugues on existing melodies and saying, hey, I'm going to take that existing melody and write a fugue on it. And I want it to be some public domain melody we could make use of, and that would be somewhat familiar to a lot of people. And I thought about a few ideas in my head that a lot of them did not make good fugue subjects, but London Bridge felt like it did. So here's Humble New Music's short fugue on London Bridge. Nice. Yeah, you did a marvelous job. That is really a nice little short fugue. So anyhow, there's a whole bunch of them in there. They're all fun, and I encourage people to check them out. Feel free to leave comments in there. But yeah, if you want to bring in some more comments, feel free to those of you who are doing this, feel free to actually post the links in the Music Masterclass community as well, and you can get some more comments. One thing I will suggest is don't use. I know I used it in my different worlds fugue. I used the hide empty staves. But that's because it's partially a jazz piece, and I knew I didn't want to have two staves for the piano throughout the piece. But when you're writing just a simple, not simple, when you're writing a straightforward classical piano piece, keep two staves throughout. Don't use hide empty staves. I only did that because I was doing something in jazz. And if I were doing it today, I probably would have kept the single staff for the entire subject. I just did it to save a page because it would have caused it to run into 4 pages instead of 3. But here, I would totally recommend doing this. Now, I will make it spill over to a second page, so maybe that's your reasoning. But in any case, be aware that that's not normally something you would do writing for piano. You wouldn't normally hide empty staves like that. There's some of the nice things that are happening here. I love this little sequence here. So that I call a sequence. Ding, 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 ding. Right. It's a little motif that keeps repeating. In this case, a step lower, a step higher, and so forth. I forgot to point that out on Dave's piece where he had a really nice sequence. And sequences are a powerful technique, and it's one of the things that I've come to realize is a lot of people don't necessarily have. I'm looking for. I'm trying to get myself back to Dave's piece because I forgot to post the link. But I just want to point out that, and then I think I will wrap up here. The sequences are a really powerful development technique that you really want to make use of. So, I had loaded his piece. Duh. So there was a sequence in it here. Right, it's the same that same basic motif, but kind of moving down. So it started up on a high G sharp, and now it's on an E, so it's come down basically a third, but it's changed along the way, right? This was a triad at the end of the passage, but now it's more of a cluster kind of sound. And this cluster was a smaller cluster. I can tell that because the range there is, well, you can just see things visually, like the line to space compared to line to line. So it's one of the ways in piano music we can kind of gauge by the spacing on the staff how wide our fingers have to be spread to play the thing. In any case, it's the same basic figure, but then moving down a step at a time, or in this case, a third at a time. So that idea of having these sequences is really a big part of writing a lot of kinds of music. So I've talked about a bunch of things today. I hope people have gotten something out of them. And Dave's asking about bar 5, the notation. So first of all, are you talking about the piano version here? Let's see. I'm going to guess bar 5 here is, unless you mean that half note there, that's probably not what you mean. You probably mean the organ bar 5. So let's see. Actually, I'm not sure which one you mean, but they're both okay. Here, this is correct to have that tie there because you've got a note on beat 2, and then it's continues into beat 3, but we want to see beat 3. So you write beat 2 as a quarter note and then tied to the 8th note. So that's all definitely correct. In the piano version here, the half note here, okay, no, that's not good. The half note here on the and of 1, don't do that. Give me, first of all, question whether it really needs to be exactly a half note, because can you really play this high C here? Which hand is going to do this? That's a good question. Which hand is going to do which? So let me find the equivalent spot here. You wrote it the other way here. So you wrote it here. This is the better way to write it. So you've got dotted quarter tied to 8th. That's the correct way to write it. But now you still have to ask yourself, can you literally, physically still be holding that low A while you play that C? I don't think you can. I can't. Well, I can almost barely, sort of, but realistically, it's not going to happen. I'm going to cheat it, and my hand's going to come off this. So just give up. Give it up. Lose the low A and simplify your life. So just delete that and it's tie, and then change that to a half rest. I think that's more in keeping with how it's going to sound anyhow. No one is going to physically be able to sound that low A unless you cheat and use the pedal to sound it. But I think you won't like the sound of that because it's too dissonant to want to hear the pedal continuing through there. And furthermore, this A here is right in the middle. This A that's ostensibly in the right hand is right in the middle of these two notes the left hand is playing. And that's not impossible, but that's one of these other things. Like I talked about all those issues of writing for violin and understanding what's playable and what's not. You have to be really careful about writing things like that when writing for piano also. So sometimes they're playable, sometimes it just really is not, or it's too awkward, or there's better ways of doing it. So those are things that you will want to think about, is actually how this applies to the piano. So again, I think I'm going to wrap up, but okay, that's all right. I was that it still gave me some good things to talk about, right? But the London Bridge Fugue had that, so that's fine. You all hopefully answered your own question there, but I'm glad I got to look at that because it did give you an opportunity to point out something. But so you all answer your own questions in there, and that's great. Let's move over to the community forum, the community space, and kind of continue things. So yeah, I would say don't worry about cluttering up the score page. You could maybe be a little cautious, not, about how much you post. Maybe don't be posting 12 pieces a day, but if you're posting one piece a week, that's whatever, it's going to be up to people. If the more you post, the less comments you get per post, right? That's how it's going to work. So you have to decide if you value more comments. I would think that you would value more comments on one piece than getting one comment each on 12 pieces, or no comments on several of them. So I think you'll find the happy medium. I'm not worried. All right. So with that, I'm going to wrap up here and just say, again, let's move over to the community space and under the share and discuss page space. That's where you can continue these discussions. Keep posting music. I'll keep talking about your pieces. And next time I'll put that idea out there right now. There's a challenge involving writing a duet. I'll think more about what that means, and we'll talk about that more next time. But if you want to start thinking, I'm not going to have any rules. I never have rules for these things. Just think about writing a duet. But think about it as writing for real people. That's part of the reason for writing a duet. Is it something that you could maybe find two people who actually, you play one of those instruments, you only got to find one other person to play the other instrument. And we'll talk about ways of doing online collaboration also. So hope everyone has enjoyed this session of the Music Masterclass. My name is Marc Sabatella with the Mastering MuseScore School. It's my pleasure to bring you these every Thursday. And if you haven't already joined the community, please do so. I've got the link there at the top. So join the community, join the space, and then you can be posting your music there and getting comments. I want people to be commenting on each other's music, and I'll be, selecting pieces periodically to feature in these weekly sessions. And that's one of the also reasons for the community, is maybe to have a better process for helping me organize what it is that I'm going to actually talk about. So, will MuseScore 4 have real-time collaboration eventually? Eventually, maybe. Don't be expecting it this year. But we can collaborate on the community site today. So, goodbye, everyone.